started in 2014. There were a lot of things happening in Atlanta public schools from the past that made it incredibly difficult for us to get off to a great start. We did launch a partnerships office and an accountability office at the same time. And the reason I mention that is for those of you who have been in Atlanta for at least several years or have paid attention to any global newspaper, you'll know that Atlanta kind of crossed an unspeakable ethics line around kind of cooking the books around data and performance in the district. It led to the largest cheating scandal in American public education history, and it's something that we've been working really hard to overcome. As a system, it means that we have to rebuild relationships and find a lot of good people who are willing to swallow what leadership had done and really get back to trying to support children. And at the same time, the reason I raise accountability is that it's about, yes, making sure that we do all the right things we're supposed to do with our resources and our information, but more importantly, it's about keeping the right information around the performance of the district and children so that we can show people where we really are and what we need to do to get to where kids need us to be. And so Rachel took the helm kind of with me. I mean, it was launched by someone else, but she came in very early and helped us create a lot of new opportunities for the district, but especially our children. And TutorMate is one of those partnerships. But the reason it's, I would argue, one of the most important is because it is actually getting at the heart of kind of why APS went off the rails in the past and why we must get back on track and get a lot of leverage around literacy. One of our most challenged areas of Atlanta Public Schools is a cluster called the Douglas Cluster, named for Frederick Douglass, who was a great man who had a great vision for not only all Americans but especially African Americans. And but it is one of the areas that has struggled the most. Very high in poverty, absolutely needs an incredible lift, like almost every school just every school that's below the I-20 mark. We call it South Atlanta. But he said that once you learn to read, you will forever be free, right? And it's something that I am reminded of when I think about all the things that have happened and not happened for children in Atlanta who are absolutely dependent on a public school system, public services, and what that means to help them get what they need to break the cycle of poverty, break the cycle of illiteracy, break the cycle of violence in their families or their communities, but also just break the barriers of all the things that are holding them back. And one thing that we talk a lot about and why TutorMate and literacy together are so important is because there are things about what happens to poor people that you and I can almost do nothing about, but there are very specific strategies that we can do as a city, as a community, and what you're doing is what we call support and sometimes remediation. Right? We already know that kids have come to us with a deficit, and you are helping because we're trying to close that gap as quickly as possible. But when poor children start school, no matter where they go, private schools, charter schools, APS, neighborhood schools, home schools, but if you live in poverty, you are starting your life 30 million words less than a child who grows up middle class. In other words, if you are from just a working class family, you start, by the time you get to be 4 years old, which is where we start early childhood or we're getting prepared for kindergarten, by the time you're 4 years old, you have a whopping 45 million words in your vocabulary. Poor kids are at 15, and they're not great words. They're not words that are what we call leverage words or bridging words. It's only what they've heard in their environment. And so when you take something like that is a natural, accepted research norm about what happens when you grow up in poverty, and you layer on Atlanta, right? Atlanta is also out of research from the Brookings Institute, the most unequal city, American city in our country. There are the rich and the super poor. When you are poor in Atlanta, your household income on average is anywhere from $15,000 to $18,000, and there's typically 5 to 6 people in your household. And that is where Atlanta Public Schools and all of this research kind of like collides. And when that happens, right, we know that for our kids, they are in communities that not only have been growing up in poverty, but if you've been in South Atlanta, you know, food deserts, worst housing conditions I've ever seen in a metropolitan city. And this is not my first rodeo as superintendent, but you have really bad housing conditions. People are moving, the mobility, chasing cheap apartment rates and things of that sort are part of the picture. And they also don't have all the other community services. So it's not like even you can hop on MARTA and get to a nice library. It's not like the bus system or transportation is great. And if you can't afford or have access to the other public services, you don't get access to all the other things that gives a child not only a healthy mind, but a healthy body and a healthy perspective about their community. So what we see are things like our kids, you don't have the books at home, you don't have a parent who's literate or a grandparent who's raising you who's literate, and they try to do something great like we'll take you to the library. Well, in our community, when a poor child walks into their community library, there is one title for every 300 kids that's appropriate for their grade level. If you're in a middle class community and there's a public library, there are 13 titles just for one kid. So imagine, one kid, same grade level, both second grade, I'm poor, I'm not. I walk into my neighborhood library and 300 kids come with me, or 299, we get one book. Over here, 13 books just for this one child. Everybody else gets their own. So the point is, even if you are the most engaged mom, dad, grandma, auntie who's trying to support our kids, you're just not getting the support. So literacy has to be something that's bigger than Atlanta Public Schools. It means that caring adults like you step in and lean in to help us bridge what they didn't get just by being born in poverty, which they won't get because Atlanta hasn't figured out how to bridge the earning gap, and they'll never get if you live in the neighborhoods where our kids live in this city below I-20. And so we are working with an organization that looks at the entire metro region. Why do we do that? It's called Learn for Life. Everybody who's involved in education or supporting education, presidents of universities, superintendents of schools, other nonprofit philanthropic groups, we all come together and we talk about the metro region. Why? Why would we get together and talk about education as a metro region? Tell me, Kathy, why would we do that?
I'm probably seeing the workforce for the future.
Thank you. You want an educated workforce, right? The more pressure you're putting on public services, the more you pay in remediation, right? So we want an educated workforce. If we do that, that's a game changer. So we get together and talk about literacy for the region. Only 20% of children who live in this region, this is all the other, like whether it's Gwinnett or Fulton County or DeKalb or Atlanta, the point is only 20% of our kids have access to high quality early childhood education. So the most important years of brain development, even if a parent thought they were doing the right thing and bringing them to an early childhood center, it doesn't mean it's quality. So let's keep adding. What is the first thing that happens to you when you're in poverty? What did I tell you? What are your words? How many words do you have less 30 million, right? Then you go into a neighborhood, and how many book titles are just for you? One for 300 children, right? And then your mom is like, but I don't care, baby. Mom's going to put you in this early childhood program because I heard that's what babies need. I don't know why. I can't explain it, but it's available in my community, right? What percent of children are getting access to quality education? 20%. So you can see like the stack, it gets stacked up against you. So for our region, only 20% of our kids have it. And when they get to the 3rd grade and all these things add up, what percent of kids do you think are actually reading proficient or above for our region?
30%.
40%. Guess what that is for Atlanta Public Schools?
20%.
Right? It's a little better. In 4 years that I've been here, that's actually better than what it was. So the achievement gap between poor kids and non-poor kids is a whopping 60 percentage points. That means if you do not live in poverty, you are 80% of the kids are proficient on grade level by the 3rd grade. If you are not in that group, you're reading at 20% with your group, with your age level. So the lift required is huge. And what has been done to the kids, and remember, poverty can really start a whole process, and if you're not literate, it just keeps cycling. So a lot of the kids who were in the cheating scandal have now graduated. The rest are just coming out. They're still in high school, but they're about to graduate. You have no opportunity. When you don't know or have seen anything else, what typically happens to your family when you decide to have kids? It starts all over again. Just starts all over again. So this is what people talk about in Atlanta when they say intergenerational poverty. We are 4 generations deep in Atlanta, which means we are the city with the deepest, most cyclical poverty of any metropolitan city in the country. That's the unequal data that people talk about. So we're here because literacy matters. If you want an educated workforce, you gotta give people the basic, as Frederick Douglass said, if you want them to be free to do and have access to a choice-filled life, you gotta help with literacy. And it has to be done. But unsticking that for poverty in Atlanta is bigger than the school system. So when people lean in, and the data, I'll leave it to others to talk about that. I think Liz and who else? Marsha is going to talk about the details of what has come out of the partnership. But I can tell you that our kids, with your support and your investment, move up about 2 grade levels, reading levels, in the 1 year that they're working with you. And that will change their lives. If we keep working, whether it's 3rd grade, 5th grade, or 8th grade, we get a lot of touch points. So long as we get them on grade level before they get out of Atlanta Public Schools, or worse, it takes too long and they want to drop out, we can get them on grade level faster. They are able to be more engaged in school, more happy in school, and certainly feel more capable of doing rigorous work in school. Yvonne has been so gracious to host us here in this gorgeous building, and I will be getting a selfie with y'all before I go. But I want to say that I think oftentimes when you're engaged in programs like this, and I've been in education for almost my entire life as a professional, and even I know that there were things I did when I was a teacher that you never know the impact you had until sometimes happenstance or life circumstances brings you back with that person. So you may work with a child in last year or this year, and you'll know that the data is better, but you won't know what that really meant for that child's life. But what we do know is when we do get it right and we do things like this, the child never forgets. And I'll end with a little story about my mentee from Atlanta Public Schools, Quantavia Stiggers, who I met my very first year at APS. Grew up in a trap house. Dad was a drug dealer. Mom had a lot of issues, and that house was full with children. He became almost the sole provider for his family. It's insane. But he was a kid, and even in middle school, was like on the hustle for the family. And while Mom got away from Dad and tried to get out of that lifestyle, a lot of pressure was put on him. And while he was doing the right thing, just trying to be a man when he was a kid, and trying to help his mom because she couldn't pull it all together, he was a good student, a quiet student, but just wasn't able to pull off the academics while trying to do everything else. His best friend, who is a first year, kind of from an immigrant family in Atlanta, I also met, but he was graduating for college, and he was going off to Stanford, another incredible American story. He told me on his way out the door that I had to look out for his best friend because he was worried and he didn't know what was going to happen to him. So I did. By the time we got to his senior year, he fought his way up to be valedictorian. He got a Gates Millennium Scholarship that now pays for undergrad and for medical school. He was that last class, thank God, got through. He got accepted into Georgia Tech. He got accepted into Michigan, which is where he ended up going, University of Michigan, and just a couple other schools. And when he did his valedictorian speech, which I wish I had with me, after everything he'd gone through, he still credited a teacher from the second grade who said to him, "One day you will be somebody, but most days you're going to feel like a nobody. But no, you've got this, and you just got to keep looking for angels in your path along the way, and you will get there." You're working with elementary kids. They don't forget. They'll never forget your kindness. They'll never forget what you did for them. They'll never forget the moment they realize, I can really read, and I'm not just learning to read, I am learning for understanding, which is a whole nother opening up in their mind, in their in their development. So, I know that sometimes it just, different people see it different ways. But I can tell you, the kids won't forget you. They know the moment the magic happens, and it will be a game changer in their lives. And I know for a fact Quantavius would not have made it to the end if he didn't have that teacher at the beginning who just kept reinforcing that he, even with all the troubles he had, was going to end up in a good place. And I always say this to our staff, the greatest predictor of success in college and after school is hope. And people are often surprised by that. They think it's grades, they think it's SAT, ACT scores, it's class rank. They give me 1,000 different reasons. But research is clear that it's hope. And kids define hope as someone who just cares about them, who gives them an opportunity to think about the future and is a caring adult in their lives. And so you don't have to be the second grade teacher, but if that second grader sees that you care about them, they'll be 30 times more engaged in school and more likely to graduate on time and go on to college or get a job. So I just want to thank you for doing that at the outset and remind you, hopefully with all this data, that literacy really, really matters and that everything that you do will help them achieve a choice-filled life. Thank you for having me.